Hungarian Folk Tales. The Cricket. Once upon a time, there lived a bootmaker and a shoemaker. They were both as poor as church mice. One day the bootmaker said to the shoemaker, "Let the devil go hungry now, my friend. If we can't make an honest living out of our trade, let's make money any other way we can." So they thought and they thought until they came up with an idea. The shoemaker would lead the judge's 6 chestnut horses into the forest, tie them to a tree, and the bootmaker would read from an old book, as if it were written there, where the judge could find his horses. But all for good money, of course. That is exactly what they did, just as they had agreed. A search for the horses was launched that stretched far across the land, but to no avail. Then the bookmaker went to see the judge and said to him, "How much will you pay me, your worship, if I find you a clue?" The judge promised to pay him 300 florins. So the bootmaker took up an old book and began to read it out loud. Up on the snow-covered hillside, in the middle of the thick forest, all the 6 horses stand tied to a beech tree. That's where they will be found. All the village folk quickly prepared and hurried to the forest, where they found the 6 horses tied to a beech tree. Then the judge happily paid the bootmaker the 300 florins. News of Mr. Cricket, for that was the bootmaker's name, spread far and wide across the land. The myth was that he had a magic book, and nothing in the world could happen that he could not solve with the help of that book. Eventually even the king got word of this and was delighted by the news, as the queen had just lost her favourite ring and had made herself ill with crying. So the king had his royal carriage harnessed with 6 golden horses and sent off to fetch the bookmaker. He even sent his royal guards with it so that Mr. Cricket would come to no harm on the way back. Mr. Cricket felt so nervous that he began to shiver and quiver like a willow leaf, as he was afraid his deceit would be uncovered. When they arrived at the palace, the king greeted him with great joy. The king immediately set about telling him what had happened. "I'll have you know, Mr. Cricket, that if you find the ring, I'll give you 6 carts full of gold." "I'll do my best, your majesty, although I doubt I shall find it." Then he asked the king to have him locked up in a room so that he could think for 3 days. And the king willingly complied. He led Mr. Cricket into the loveliest room and sent him so much to eat and to drink that the poor man was at a loss where to begin. The first day went by, but Mr. Cricket came up with nothing. The second day went by, and the third, and poor Mr. Cricket began to lose heart. So he thought to himself that he would count how many courses he was going to have for the last meal of his life. The first servant came in with the first course, and Mr. Cricket said out loud, "Here comes the first." The servant was so frightened by this that he almost dropped the plate. He rushed out to the kitchen and said to the cook and the undercook, "Oh dear, we're done for. That magician knows we stole the ring." Of course, this was true. Indeed, it had been the servant, the cook and the undercook who had stolen the Queen's ring. They agreed that the second course should be taken in by the cook. And as the cook entered the room, Mr. Cricket said, "Here comes the second." The cook slammed down the plate in great fright and fled to the kitchen. "Oh dear, we're done for. I'll see what he says to me," said the undercook, and entered with the third course in hand. Of course, the bootmaker said, "Here comes the third." The undercook was so scared that he fell to his knees in front of Mr. Cricket and admitted that the 3 of them had stolen the ring. Then the servant and the cook ran in, and they too fell to their knees, begging him not to tell on them and promised to pay him 300 florins each. Mr. Cricket thought to himself that it sounded good enough. Beside the 6 carts of gold, he had them then produce the ring, which he pushed into a piece of white bread and threw it out of the window just as the king's turkeys were passing by. One of the turkeys picked it up and swallowed it at once. Mr. Cricket was thrilled to inform the king, "Your Majesty, I know where the ring is. Have that turkey killed and you will find the ring in its belly." So the turkey was killed, its stomach opened, and lo and behold, the Queen's ring came forth. Then the ring was taken quickly to the Queen. In the twinkling of an eye, the Queen stopped her sobbing and was filled with the joy of the world. The king had 6 carts filled with gold. Then he had Mr. Cricket driven home in the royal carriage, and his steward and a regiment of soldiers escort him so that no harm could come to all the gold. As they were riding along, an idea crossed the steward's mind. He thought, "I'll play a trick on you, you bootmaker magician." So he got out of the coach, spotted a cricket on the ground, picked it up and held it tight in his hand. Then he asked Mr. Cricket, "Well, if you know so much, tell me what I'm holding in my hand." Mr. Cricket scratched his head and finally said, "Well, Cricket, you're in a tight corner now." "That's right," said the steward. "It is indeed a cricket. Your wisdom is endless. Now I know." Hungarian Folk Tales. The Wolf's Joke. Once upon a time, there lived a man called Uncle George Fox. This Uncle George Fox had a horse, a sheep, and a pig. But he did not give them anything to eat all winter. They were so skinny by springtime that their bones were sticking out. He ushered them through the gate and said, "Off you go, you'll make good food for wolves. And why didn't you grow fat in winter time?" But how could they if he didn't feed them? This was overheard by a wolf. When the horse walked past him, the wolf said, "Stop right now and let me eat you. That's what your owner said." "You may eat me if you will, but can't you see I'm all skin and bone? What is it that you want to eat on me? If you let me go on my way, I'll grow fat upon the hillside during the summer, and then you'll have a real feast on me." Well, the wolf let the horse go, and off it went. Then the pig came. The wolf said, "Stop right now and let me eat you. That's what your owner said. What is it that you want to eat on me? I'm nothing but skin and bones. If you let me go, I'll grow fat upon the hillside and return with 6 piglets that will make a real feast for you." The wolf let the pig go too, and the pig went off. Then the sheep came. The wolf said, "Stop right now and let me eat you. That's what your owner said." "What is it that you want to eat on me? I'm nothing but skin and bones. If you let me go, I'll grow fat upon the hillside and make a real feast for you when I return." The wolf let it go too, and did nothing all summer but wait for the 3 animals to return as they said they would. He lounged about, moving from bush to bush, all summer. Autumn came, and one day he saw the pig trot along with 6 piglets. 6 lovely piglets. The wolf saw them from under a bush. He rejoiced at the thought of the feast he was about to have. He emerged from under the bush and went to greet them. "Jolly good you didn't deceive me. I've been looking forward to eating you all this time, and now I'll have my feast." Then the pig said, "If I had meant to deceive you, I wouldn't have come this way, but there's one small problem." "What is it?" "There was no one up on the hillside, and so the piglets haven't been christened yet. They ought to be christened first because it's not good to eat them like this." "Where can they be christened?" "Here in the village. The priest will do it." "Oh, all right then. Take them to the priest, have them christened, and bring them back." The pig set off with the piglets in tow. Then the pig turned back and said to the wolf, "Come here, let me whisper in your ear what the name of each one will be. You'd better know." The wolf did as bid, holding its ear close to the pig's mouth. The pig was in high spirits, grabbed the wolf's ear and began to tug away at it. The 6 piglets followed suit and almost tore the wolf to pieces. He could hardly manage to get away. They then went off and the sheep came. "I hope you won't deceive me," the pig did. "If I had wanted to deceive you, I wouldn't have come this way." "Stop then and let me eat you. At least you'll make a good feast for me." "You may eat me if you will, but there's a slight problem." "What is it?" "You know something. If you begin to chew me, it will hurt me, but it will also give you a toothache. Stand in that hole, hold your mouth wide open so I can hop into it, and you can just swallow me." The wolf stood in the hole and opened his mouth. The sheep prepared itself, took a nice long run, and hit the wolf so hard that it somersaulted like a ball. Then the sheep leapt over it and ran off. Then came the horse. The wolf stood in front of it and said, "At least you had better not deceive me. 2 animals have already done so." "If I had wanted to deceive you, I wouldn't have come this way." "All right, stop then and let me eat you." "You may eat me if you will, but there's a tiny problem." "What is it?" "A maiden is getting married in the next village and I've been asked to take the bride around. When that's over, I'll come here and you can eat me." "Well, I wouldn't mind seeing that for myself. I mean, how you take the bride around." "Come and see for yourself." "How can I?" "Hop on my back." So the wolf sat on the horse's back and the horse took it into town. A man in the village was known by the name of Uncle Andrew Duncan. In summertime, there were always men playing cards in his yard. They were playing cards as usual when the horse passed in front of the gate with the wolf on his back. The people saw the wolf on the back of the horse and began to shout, "Look there, a wolf on the back of a horse! Look there, a wolf on the back of a horse!" Each one of them reached for a stick or an axe. The horse slowed down so that the people could catch up with it. This they did, and the poor wolf had a hard job trying to get away without being battered to death. There was a man in the village called Uncle Pete Kalan. He was gathering wood in the forest when he saw the wolf approaching. So Uncle Pete Kalan swiftly hid behind a big tree so the wolf wouldn't see him. The wolf happened to sit down under that very tree, keeping his eye on the village in the distance. Then he began to say to himself, "It serves me right. I was so foolish. I wish someone would hit me right now." Uncle Pete Kalan hit him so hard with the axe that the wolf was almost knocked dead. "Heavens," the wolf said. "It was only meant to be a joke." Hungarian Folk Tales. The Princess's Shoes. Once upon a time, there lived a most beautiful princess who was lovelier than any maiden on earth. Prince after prince came to her father's palace. Princes from all over the world surrounded the lovely princess, telling her the sweetest things, but it was no use. It all went in one ear and out of the other. In fact, she laughed at them so loudly that the whole palace resounded to her laughter. There was one among the princes who caught the princess's eye, and she took a fancy to him, but he was none the wiser for it, as the merciless princess poked even more fun at him than she did at the others. As time went by, it happened one day that 2 fleas hopped into the princess's palm. Well, she was as quick as lightning and held them fast in her hand. She took the 2 fleas to a pot containing lard and put them in there so that they would grow big and fat. She was right indeed, and hardly a year had gone by when the 2 fleas had grown so huge that their hide was big enough to make a pair of shoes. The princess made up her mind. She summoned the butcher, had the fleas skinned, ordered the shoemaker to tan the hides and the bootmaker to make her a pair of fine boots. She had it announced far and wide that she would marry the man who could tell her what animal's hide her boots were made out of. The princes came flocking again from far-flung corners of the world. They were all fine young men in their prime. They lined up in the courtyard and started guessing what animal's hide the princess's shoes could be made out of. But none of them got it right. Then the princess had taken a liking to, dressed in a beggar's rags, and sneaked into the princess's bedchamber, where he hid in the night, hoping to hear what the princess would tell her maid about the boots. He could not have been more right. The princess had a good laugh at all the silly answers she had been hearing all day and said to her maid, "You'll see, nobody will ever know that my boots have been made out of flea skin." That was enough for the prince. The next day he mingled in his beggar's clothes among the princes, and when his turn came, he uttered, "Your Royal Highness, your boots are made out of flea skin." The princess went white as a sheet, shivered like a leaf, but did not wish to go back on her word, so she said, "You're right, beggar, so from this moment forth, I'm your wedded wife, till death do us part." "All right, my lovely young wife, but take off your nice silk clothes and put on beggar's rags. Then we'll make a perfect match." The haughty princess donned a beggar woman's clothes and accompanied her husband to a dirty little hut on the outskirts of the village. As if all that had not been enough, she even had to beg with her husband day in, day out. On top of it all, she even had to make a fire and cook dinner for her husband as best she could with what little she had. To make matters worse, a farm labourer came and shouted to her in a loud voice, "Hey you, beggar woman, go at once to hoe the land on the prince's estate." What else could the poor princess do? She went off as she had been ordered, shedding many a tear on the way. Her husband then made straight for the palace. There he donned his bright royal clothes and walked out among the labourers. It was his fields that the beggar woman had been sent to. The prince kept on encouraging and praising the labourers, but scolded and humiliated his wife, saying that he had never seen such a bad farmhand, although the poor woman was sweating with the effort she was making. Dinner time came, all the labourers were seated at a big table, and silver cutlery was put next to the plate of each. The prince still had not had enough. He wanted his haughty wife never to forget the experience, so he told another woman labourer to slip a silver spoon into the beggar woman's pocket. There was a lot of toing and froing after dinner when the servants found a silver spoon was missing. They went through the pockets of all the labourers and found the silver spoon in the beggar woman's pocket. In vain did she swear that she had not stolen it. She was put in a dungeon. By this time, the lesson had been enough. Hardly had the door of the dungeon been locked than the prince had it opened again and walked in to his young wife. There he gently took her by the hand, led her up to the palace and said to her, "All right, your crying days are over. Put on your nice silk clothes again. I've put on mine too, for I was the beggar you married. Do you see now, my dear?" Well, to cut a long story short, they made up and started a new life together that was a joy to see for everyone. I saw it. Make sure you do too. Hungarian Folk Tales. Peter and Paul. Once upon a time, there was a poor man. He was as poor as a church mouse. Children, he had many though, but apart from them, he had nothing but a single cockerel. Next door to him there lived a rich man. He was so rich that he had absolutely no idea of all that he had. His yard was full of hens, cockerels, and fine farm animals. It happened one day that poor man Peter's cockerel went over to rich man Paul's yard. The cockerel went over to the hens because he was so bored all alone in Peter's yard. The rich man, greedy Paul, saw this and he said to the poor man, "Listen here, Peter. Do something with this cockerel. Either kill it or sell it. But get it out of my yard, otherwise I'll batter it and it'll be of no use to you anymore. I don't want it to come over to my yard." Poor man Peter was desperate. What should he do? He thought hard. He'd kill it and cook it for his children, but his children had never eaten meat in their lives before, and they would get used to the taste of meat and want it at every meal. Oh well, he thought, I'll take it to my master and give it to him as a gift. Maybe he will give me something in return. So he did just this. And his master said to him, "Hey, Peter, you're a poor man with many children. Wouldn't you have been better off cooking this cockerel for your children at home?" "No, sir," said Peter, "because we're so many at home, there are so many children that one cockerel would never satisfy them all. They'd each just have one bite, and once they had tasted the meat, they'd realise it was better than boiled potatoes or simple soup, and they'd never want to eat those things anymore. They'd always want to eat meat." "All right, Peter. We'll roast this cockerel for dinner today, but I want you to be here to serve it to us." The master had 2 sons, 2 daughters, and a wife, so they were 6. Peter went to their house at midday when dinner was going to be served. There was the roast cockerel on the table. Peter thought hard and began to carve. He reasoned thus: the master and the lady of the house are the head of the family, so I'll cut the head and the neck off for them. I'll give the 2 wings to the 2 young ladies so they can fly off with more ease when it comes to marrying. The young masters will get the 2 feet so they can run better. And I, poor devil, will make do with what is left. This way he himself had the bulk of the cockerel. The master rewarded Peter for his wisdom. He gave him a horse, a cart, a plough, and everything to go with it, as well as some land to farm as his own. He told him to run his own farm and grow rich on it. Rich man Paul got word of this. He was ever so envious. If his neighbour had been given so many things for 1 single cockerel, how much would the master give him for 5 cockerels, he wondered. Rich man Paul finally made up his mind to take his 5 cockerels to the master. He was so envious. He gave them all as a gift. The master said to rich man Paul, "Listen here, Paul, we'll roast these 5 cockerels for dinner today. I want you to serve us at table. If you fail to divide the roast justly, I'll have you whipped 50 lashes. But if you manage to divide it well, I'll reward you richly." The 5 cockerels were roasted, and none was cut up. They were all in one piece. Rich man Paul went to the master's house, but he couldn't divide the meat justly in any way. Then the master said to his servant, "Go and fetch Peter." So Peter came. "Well, Peter, you'll have to divide these 5 cockerels among us." Peter thought hard. "Well," he said, I've always believed in the Holy Trinity. This time I'll be guided by it too. I reckon the master and the lady of the house and a cockerel will make a trinity. By the same token, he said, the 2 young ladies and a cockerel will make a trinity. The 2 young masters and a cockerel also. So I, poor devil, and 2 cockerels will also make a trinity. This cheeky but shrewd way of dividing the roast made the master and his entire family laugh. The master richly rewarded Peter again and had the rich man Paul whipped as he had pledged. Paul was given 50 lashes and told never to return to the palace again. Hungarian Folk Tales. Cinderella. Once upon a time, there lived a poor man, and he had a daughter. Next door there lived a widow who had 2 daughters. The widow wanted the man to marry her, so she sent word to him that if he married her, she would treat his daughter like her own. The poor man thought very hard for a long time and finally made up his mind to marry the widow. The stepmother always treated her stepdaughter like dirt and never went out of her way to cause her sorrow and pain. When Sunday came, the widow and her 2 daughters prepared to go to church. The stepmother said to Cinderella, "Here, while we're away at church, pick out the peas from the ashes, cook them, and serve them." The stepmother and her 2 daughters went off to church, and Cinderella was left behind. And she was about to begin to pick the peas out of the ashes when a flock of doves flew in through the window. They dropped 3 nuts and set about separating the peas from the ashes. The 3 nuts were sent by Cinderella's mother. While the doves were picking out the peas, God descended and ordered the girl to go to church, but to leave when the priest raised the sacraments. Cinderella donned the silver dress and had a look at her reflection in the well before she left. When she saw herself, she was so pleased with what she saw that she almost fell into the well. The service was attended by the prince too. As soon as he caught a glimpse of Cinderella, his heart was captured. He couldn't take his eyes off her. But when the priest raised the sacraments, Cinderella left the church. The prince followed her right away, but the girl vanished into thin air and the prince could see no trace of her anywhere. Back at home, the girl took off her dress. The food was ready because God had prepared it for her. The stepmother came home with her 2 daughters. "You'll never guess what we saw at church. There's no one as beautiful as that girl in the whole wide world." Then they told her what they had seen. "I saw it too." "How come?" "From the mulberry tree." That was all the stepmother needed. She immediately had the mulberry tree cut down. The next Sunday, she mixed the lentils into the ashes and ordered Cinderella to separate the lentils from the ashes, then to cook them and serve them. The 3 women left her alone again. Then God descended with his angels and ordered them to do Cinderella's chores. He told the girl to get ready and do the same as she had done the Sunday before. This time Cinderella donned the golden dress. As she was setting off, she looked in the well and was enchanted by what she saw there. The prince was already expecting her. When the priest raised the sacraments, Cinderella left the mass. She vanished into thin air again. When Cinderella arrived home again, all the food was ready because God had prepared it all. "You'll never believe what we saw. I saw it too, from the top of the well." The stepmother had it cut down at once. The third Sunday, the stepmother mixed flour into the ashes for Cinderella to separate. It was God again that did the job for her, and Cinderella donned the diamond dress and went off to Mass. But not without looking in the well first. She couldn't believe her eyes, she was so dazzling. When the priest raised the sacraments, she got up to leave. But the prince had had the threshold of the church covered in glue, so one of her shoes got stuck. The prince picked up the shoe and set off on horseback to look for its owner. At home, the stepmother's two daughters were again boasting of what they had seen. Again, Cinderella told them that she had seen it from the roof of the house. Upon that, the mother had the roof of the house demolished. The prince went through the whole village. He had all the young maidens in every house try on the shoe, but it did not fit any of them. When he reached the stepmother's house, Cinderella was made to hide under the washtub while they waited for the prince. The girls tried on the shoe, but it did not fit either of them, despite their mother having carved bits off their ankles. Then all of a sudden, the cockerel began to crow in the yard. "The pretty girl is under the washtub! The pretty girl is under the washtub!" The stepmother heard this and began to chase the cockerel, but the prince heard it too. The pretty girl was indeed under the washtub. She tried on the shoe, which fitted her perfectly. Then the prince said to Cinderella, "Love of my life, I'm yours and you're mine forever and a day." This time it was the stepmother's two daughters who were left behind. And this is the end of my tale.